Thank you very much for coming to join us today. This is Korea Institute's SBS Distinguished Lecture in Social Sciences. I am Sun Joo Kim, Harvard-Yenching Professor of Korean History. I teach pre-modern Korean history here at Harvard. I am also Director of Korea Institute since last year. Let me just say a few words about this SBS Distinguished Lecture in Social Sciences. The Seoul Broadcasting System, SBS, has generously given us, Korea Institute, an endowment to use its income for a number of different uses, and we decided to offer this distinguished lecture in social sciences. And we have been able to offer this lecture occasionally. Most recently, President Bae-young Lee of Ewha University, Ewha Women's University, and Chairman Sa-gong-il from Korea International Trade Association last year. This year, we're very honored and happy to have Ambassador Kim Woosang, currently president of the Korea Foundation. He has served as the Korean ambassador to Australia from May 2008 to August 2011. Dr. Kim received PhD degree in political science from the University of Rochester in America in 1988. He has researched and taught international politics for more than 20 years as research associate at the Hoover Institute, Stanford University, and as a professor in the Department of Political Science, Texas A&M University, Sungmyeong University, and Yonsei University in South Korea. Dr. Kim has served as the director of the Institute of East and West Studies at Yonsei and still holds professor position at the Department of Political Science and International Studies at Yonsei University. Professor Kim has also served as member of the steering committee of the Council for Security Cooperation in the Asia Pacific, the guest columnist of the Donga Daily newspaper in Korea, and member of the advisory committee of the National Security Council. It's such great pleasure to have Ambassador Kim here today, and he'll be giving us a lecture on the title of Korea's Middle Power Diplomacy and Korea-U.S. Alliance. Please welcome Ambassador Kim.
Thank you, Professor Kim. I'm very much honored to have an opportunity to give a talk at Harvard Korea Institute. I've been traveling for more than a week now. I was in Brasilia and then Santiago and to Rio and now in Boston. So, and even today's schedule, I'm totally exhausted. So if you don't mind, I would like to sit and give a short talk. I'll give about 20 to 25 minutes talk on the importance of Korea's middle power leadership role and its strategic importance to Korea and also our alliance allies, the United States. And then have some Q&A session with you. Before I joined the diplomatic circle as one of the practitioners of the foreign affairs, as Professor Kim introduced, I've spent 20-some years in teaching and researching international relations and foreign affairs. And during my academic life, I've advocating Korea playing a pivotal middle power role in the Asia-Pacific region. Pivotal middle power role means middle power leadership role. When I arrived in, excuse me, in 2008, I was appointed as a Korean ambassador to Australia, and when I went down to Canberra, Australia, then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd began to argue that Australia play a creative middle power role in the Asia Pacific. And I had several occasions to meet him and discuss the middle power cooperation. At one point, I enjoyed a quite lengthy time to discuss our two countries' role of middle power leadership and cooperation in a private conversation with the Prime Minister. During my tenure in Canberra, I had meaningful times to reinforce my idea of Korea playing the pivotal middle power role. And I was so lucky not just to witness Australia's philosophy and behavior as a long-time leading middle power, but to have an opportunity to be involved in middle power cooperation with one of the leading middle power country, Australia. While I was in Canberra for 3.5 years, the two leaders of Korea and Australia held summit meetings. I think it was 14 times, including 3 standalone summit meetings and frequent telephone calls between the two leaders. If I had to pick one outcome out of the successful bilateral middle power cooperation between Korea and Australia, it must be the establishment of G20, not a G8, to deal with this world financial crisis. G20 become the regular international forum to deal with, to discuss these world financial crisis. And two leaders' cooperation helped establish this G20 to become the major regular international forum. Now I am in charge of the Korea Foundation. And Korea Foundation, I think you all may know that the Korea Foundation is the leading Korean institution for public diplomacy. It seems very appropriate for me to speak about the importance of Korea's middle power role in the global society, since I strongly believe that one of the best ways of carrying out our public diplomacy, conducting public diplomacy, is for Korea to play middle power leadership role in the global society. Welcome, some student just arriving. Let me start with challenges Korea faces right now. Like many other countries in the Asia-Pacific region, Korea faces challenges at the global level and regional level, and also at the peninsula level. At the global level, Korea faces challenges just like any other countries related to current world financial crisis, climate change, green growth, sustainable development, natural disaster, to mention a few. And all these are human security related challenges. I think you must have heard the term human security many times these days. At the regional level, we all are cognizant of the rise of China and its potential impact on global and regional security architecture. The countries in the Asia-Pacific region also are experiencing territorial disputes between China and Japan, and between Korea and Japan as well. At the peninsula level, Korea is facing security threat from North Korea, especially because of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. To deal with all these challenges, Korea needs, I think, the following coherent policy strategies. First of all, the most important thing is Korea-U.S. alliance relationship. There is no doubt that Korea needs to maintain strong military alliance with the United States. Korea-U.S. alliance relationship is the main pillar of Korean foreign policy. Our alliance ties will help meet all these aforementioned challenges and send out a positive message to neighboring countries that Korea is ready to overcome all these challenges with support of our main ally, the United States. As a matter of fact, I strongly believe that even after Korean Peninsula is reunified, we need to maintain strong military alliance relationship with the United States. So the U.S.-Korea military alliance ties is the basis for Korea play middle power leadership role from now on. So before I talk about Korea playing middle power leadership role at the multilateral setting, the second one I argue is a Korea-China economic strategic partnership. That Korea-China economic and trade partnership is becoming more and more important. Korean economic trade relationship with China is rapidly rising. I think most of you already know that currently the trade volume between Korea and China is larger than the trade volume, the sum of the trade volume between even United States and Japan. U.S. used to be the number one and Japan second, but now China is larger than, the trade volume with China is larger than Japan and U.S. combined. And this kind of trend will continue in the years to come as the rise of China becomes more and more apparent. Korea almost share a border with China. I say almost share a border because we have North Korea as a buffer right now, but sooner or later, if we reunify, we share a border. China's right next to us. And the rise of China can be very much intimidating unless we maintain a strong economic and trade partnership as well as friendly ties with China. Geostrategically, geopolitically, it's very important for Korea. Contrary to many, maybe even here, some of you may say, he says that Korea-U.S. alliance relationship is important, but then now he also argues that Korea-China relationship is also important. These two may contradict each other. But contrary to many of you who worry, I argue that Korea's strong economic and trade relationship with China does not contradict with our alliance ties with the United States. It is strategically compatible with strong Korean alliance ties with the United States. I believe that the strong economic ties with the China will provide a favorable position for Korea to improve our alliance ties with the United States on a more equitable basis. At the same time, our strong alliance ties with the United States will provide Korea with leverage to negotiate stronger economic and trade ties with China on a more equal basis. Now, so this relationship with China is our second pillar of the Korea's foreign policy. And thirdly, and I think it's more importantly, in addition to these two great power relationships, I argue Korea's active middle power engagement in various human security issues with other like-minded middle power countries in multilateral settings will provide a better state of affairs for Korea to successfully deal with many potential challenges. As one of the three pillars of the Korean foreign policy, Korea playing the middle power leadership role in the multilateralism will not just make Korea to be respected member of the global society, but will provide Korea's more balanced foreign policy environment. I made this argument a long time ago, and even I published the book 신한국책략 3 in about a year ago in Korean. And these arguments sounds very much like, if some Koreans read very recent newspapers, one of the, we have three candidates for presidential election. And from one camp, the argument is almost exactly the same as what I've said. So someone must have read my book and came up with the argument. But it's not me. Then which countries can be identified as middle powers, and what is the middle power leadership role? There's no universal agreed upon definition of middle power, but many scholars and diplomats have suggested that for a country to be recognized as a middle power, it needs to satisfy two criteria. First one is capability. Second is willingness. Willingness, in a sense, the country's a style of diplomacy. Today, I will not spend much time on definition of the middle power. We do not have time. But just briefly speaking, a country must have enough capability, that is economic, military, demographic capabilities to meaningfully influence regional affairs, and at the same time have intention of actively engaging in regional and global affairs by endeavoring to bring about peaceful resolution in international disputes, facilitating multilateral solutions to global issues, and demonstrating good international citizenship. Through an ad hoc coalition building with like-minded countries in the multilateral settings, a middle power can play the role of catalyst by triggering initiatives and building coalitions, play the role of facilitator by developing agendas and convening formal meetings, and play the role of manager by taking a key role in building and managing institutions, and by playing the honest broker role. Historically, Korea has been limited in its middle power roles. Geopolitically, Korea is surrounded by great power sphere of influence, U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Although these days, some Japanese scholars started to argue that Japan is not great power anymore. Japan is a middle power. So Korea is not surrounded by four great powers, but Korea and Japan together are surrounded by three great powers. Oh, very interesting argument, but I still do see that Korea is surrounded by four great powers. During the Cold War era, Korea simply played a traditional follower role. Thus, Korea was heavily reliant on great power relations. However, Korea is no longer so removed from other like-minded middle power countries around the world. Korea's integration into the global economy, its emergence as a democratic state, and its increasing importance in the global society are very well recognized. As a matter of fact, recently, Korea has been playing meaningful middle power leadership roles in the global society. Let me give you several good examples. First, the whole Korean peninsula was devastated by the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. And with support of Americans and other 15 countries under the UN flag, our democracy and freedom were saved. And now, with your support, the current Korea exists. And I think that almost all Koreans, in their deep inside of their heart, they'll remember all these very vividly and feel thankful. And out of these devastation, within an unprecedented short period of time, Korea has developed from one of the poorest countries in the world into one of the top 10 largest economies, top 10 military powers, and top 20 or so most democratic countries in the world. It is amazing. Second, Korea has, in a relative short time, made an unparalleled move from a recipient of ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, to a donor country. Korea recently joined the 2050 Club as the 7th member. That is a country with 20,000 GDP per capita and more than 50 million of population size. Only 7th. In 1960s, we were poorer than many countries. You name many countries in Latin America, many countries in South Asia right now. We were poorer than those countries. But now, in that short period of time, with your support, Korea made it. We have already hosted successfully the 1988 Summer Olympic and 2002 co-hosted together with Japan 2002 World Cup, Soccer World Cup. And our two latest Olympic performance was marvelous, right? The eighth in 4 years ago and the fifth this year in gold medal numbers, yeah? And we are going to hold 2018 Winter Olympic Games in Korea. And we also produced international leaders, such as UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Yeah? And Korea has successfully hosted G20 summit in 2010, the fourth high-level forum on aid effectiveness in 2011, and the nuclear security summit this year, in which almost 60 head of countries and head of international organizations participated. It's really historic a summit meeting happened in Korea, in Seoul. And Korea has also co-chaired UN Ministerial Meeting on Climate Change and was selected to host a GCF. It's a Green Climate Fund, as well as having recently established a Global Green Growth Institute. I think that the GCF is going to be even larger than and more important than IMF sooner or later. And Incheon, the city of Incheon, hosted this Green Climate Fund Secretariat. Korea also participates very actively in many other human security areas, including the UN peacekeeping operation, anti-piracy operations, non-proliferation, refugee, natural disaster, and so forth. The Korean government shows its willingness to contribute to the global society by steadily increasing the level of its ODA and will more than double its current level by 2015. So Korean government also demonstrates its willingness to do more, to play more important middle power role. All these objectively demonstrate, I believe, that Korea is now one of the leading middle powers in the global affairs. I must emphasize that Korea is uniquely situated in that we understand the perspectives of both developed and developing countries because we have first-hand experience of the challenges of lifting a nation out of poverty. Hence, Korea would like to share this knowledge with many other developing countries around the world. Korea has a unique experience of successful economic development and political modernization, democratization. At the same time, it's very unique, and we can share this unique, successful model of Korea with many other countries, developing countries around the world. There are some roles that great power may not be welcome to play, since they may unnecessarily intimidate third parties or concerted parties. In those cases, middle powers like Korea can lead leadership, can lead on a negotiation, for example. Let me come up with one example. For example, nuclear safety governance. We need a coherent, probably new, a bit developed nuclear safety governance. But if, imagine, U.S. tried to lead in setting up the new governance, it'll be very difficult. There may be many challenges, unnecessary challenges. But if countries like Brazil, who doesn't have nuclear weapons, but has technology and knowledge about the nuclear science, and country like Korea, who doesn't have, play together, like-minded group, middle power countries, lead on setting up this kind of nuclear safety governance, I think will be very helpful for prosperity and peace of the global society. You know. So those are kind of areas in which middle power can play very important roles. Korea has much to offer as well as gain by playing this kind of middle power leadership role in regional and global affairs. First of all, as I mentioned, Korea, which is surrounded by great power sphere of influence, can balance out potential great power influence through active middle power engagement. By playing a middle power leadership role in multilateralism, Korea's foreign policy environment and its strategic position will be much more balanced, stable, and advantageous. Some have recently mentioned that Korea is one of the major powers in the world. I think whenever I go someplace and then start to make argument of Korea playing middle power leadership role, there are some challenges, good challenges, because they say, no, Korea is not middle power. Korea is now one of the major powers. 3 days ago, when I was in Santiago, I was having lunch with vice foreign minister. Foreign minister was not around. And Ambassador Schmidt, Chilean ambassador, he told me that Korea is not a middle power. Korea is a major power. Many have commented that way. But to me, Korea is not a major power. Unless Korea actively engage in regional and global affairs, surrounded by great power sphere of influence, Korea will be always small power in a relative sense. Because you are surrounded by number 1, 2, 3, 4 great powers. No matter how strong you are surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4 great powers. In a relative term, you are always small power, unless you start to be involved and play important middle power leadership role. Then you can be considered or recognized as important middle power. That's my argument. It's very different from Ambassador Schmidt's argument. Several already said that Korea is one of the major power now, but no, I don't think so. We should not behave like major power. We have to. The reason is most of the middle power role are humanitarian, humanistic, moralistic, ethical, altruistic, and peace-loving. Think of these human security-related issues: humanitarian assistance, human rights, natural disaster, sustainable development, green growth, climate change. You all have to sacrifice, right? By participating, by trying to play a leadership role on those issues in the global society, you have to sacrifice yourself. Yeah? So by doing so, by playing, the more you play a middle power leadership role on those areas, the greater chance that you'll become respected by the global society and better known by global citizens. Yeah? In that respect, playing a middle power leadership role itself can be one of the best way of conducting public diplomacy. Yeah? You play middle power role, you don't worry about public diplomacy because you will be respected by global citizens anyway, sooner or later. Yeah? That's my key argument for today. Korea's contribution to the global society will also increase the chance of peaceful resolution of Korean Peninsula problem. The key problem is what? Reunification. We all want to reunify the peninsula with the strong support of world opinion, with many friends around the world, friends of Korea around the world. In the near future, the Korean Peninsula may be peacefully united under democratic terms. So, Korea try to play middle power role is good for Korea. At one hand, you'll think that why do we have to? Why do we have to sacrifice while many other countries do not contribute. On climate change issue, you have to contribute first. But we have a lot to gain by doing so, to me. So we have to go for it. The world now realizes the importance of soft power and public diplomacy. Korean government, leaders, and intellectuals in our society also are aware of and stress the significance of soft power and public diplomacy. Well, the Professor Joseph Nye is right here, right? Next door, arguing the importance of soft power. Now, the Korea Foundation is the leading independent nonprofit institution of Korea's public diplomacy. The main mission of Korea Foundation is to make friends of Korea around the world. To do so, we provide opportunities for global citizens to enjoy our traditional and modern arts and culture in various parts of the world, including Boston Museum, Metropolitan, British Museum, and many other museums, to name a few. At the same time, we support arts and culture of other countries to be introduced to our society. We also provide infrastructure for Korean studies, including language, history, traditional and contemporary, arts and culture, and recently I started to emphasize on contemporary political economy of Korea. And the support goes to more than 100 universities around the world. And we also promote people-to-people exchanges by inviting more than 1,000 individuals from around the world to Korea and show them around Korea and provide them opportunity to build their own networks in Korea. And we also hold bilateral forums and multilateral conferences on these important human security related issues. Currently, the so-called Korea wave is very popular. And the Korea fever, Korea wave, such as Psy's Gangnam Style, we all know Gangnam Style, and K-pop songs has spread all over Asia, Europe, and Latin America, and even Africa. Moreover, worldwide, there is a fairly strong interest among university students in learning Korean language and Korean studies. A couple of months ago, when I was in Prague, in KOR-U University, in Charles University, there are Korean language courses for 20 students were offered, and more than 500 students applied. And that kind of situation occurs not just in Prague, but even in Paris and other places. From Hanoi to Paris, I can see those things happening right now. I believe it is propitious timing for the Korea Foundation to carry out our own mission. Our own mission is to make friends of Korea around the world by providing the real Korean stuff to them, by providing opportunity for them to know much more about the real Korea. Okay? When many young people around the world are interested in K-pops, the Korea Foundation has to provide more opportunities for them to learn about Korean culture and arts, Korean tradition, and modern Korean society, the real Korean stuff. Very recently, I read one of the Korean newspapers, major newspapers, and on one article, one Kenya young girl student, university student from Kenya, studying in Korea, and she had an interview in one of the major newspapers. In the article, she said the reason why, when she was asked why you are here in Korea to study, and the answer was, well, I wanted to learn Korea's model of economic development and democratization. So that after I learned this, she wants to go back to her country and then make Kenya to be more democratic and more economically prosperous. I was about to, when I was reading that article, I was about to cry, almost burst into tears. We have to share knowledge by providing opportunities to those people around the world. That's Korea playing, important middle power leadership role. What needs to be done to let more global citizens know about Korea? For past 20 years, I evaluate that the Korea Foundation has been very successful in providing various programs to intellectuals in great powers, especially the United States, for them to be more knowledgeable about Korea and to become friends of Korea. Now, with understanding and support of our American friends about Korea's goodwill and its long-lasting alliance ties with the United States, it is about time for Korea Foundation to reach out to more middle power countries. The Korea Foundation needs to expand our program and projects to more middle power countries so that we can make more friends of Korea in those like-minded middle power countries. But we can do this only with the strong basis. The strong basis is what? Korea-U.S. military alliance relationship. With that and the trust between our two countries, we can expand our partnership to middle power countries, and we can expand our interest to human security related issues. So we need your understanding. Just like we need your understanding in Korea, improving our economic and trade ties with China and friendly ties with China, we also need American understanding in Korea trying to play important middle power leadership role. It's good for all of us, good for the United States, good for Korea, and good for other countries as well. So those can go together. It's not contradict each other. To do this, we need a bigger size of the annual budget. And that's my job to raise funds. In the meantime, a modest budget redistribution scheme will be carried out in favor of middle power partners. And in addition, we'll carry out our Korea Foundation signature program, so-called signature programs for Korean studies and public diplomacy, including we have so-called Korea Foundation Global E-School Program, and Korea Foundation Global Seminar, and Korea Foundation Korea Festival. This year, through the Global E-School Program, the Foundation provides more than 120 real-time, long-distance, visual online lectures on Korean studies and languages to more than 50 universities in 22 countries. And this semester. The global seminar, which consists of lectures and group discussions for 3 to 5 days, will focus on various human security issues. We have already hosted global seminars in Seoul and in the United States last year and this year. And next year, we plan to hold 2 Korea Foundation Global Seminar series, one in one of the ASEAN member countries and the other in one of the Scandinavian countries. And I must invite American experts on human security issues to the global seminars. I was just finishing discussion with your provost, Professor Dominguez, and we discussed on these issues. I understand that Harvard has many excellent scholars on these issues. The Korea Foundation Festival is composed of a diverse array of cultural and academic events. This year, we hosted the Korea Foundation Brazil Festival, in which we share our traditional and contemporary culture and art through exhibitions in museums, traditional and contemporary musical and dance performances, and lecture series on Korean contemporary political economy, and others in several cities in Brazil for about 3 months period. Our members, Ms. Yoon Jin and Ms. Kim Hae-young, has been playing very important role in Brazil, and we just came from Brazil. Me from Rio and they from Sao Paulo to join here to Harvard. Next year, we plan to hold the Korea Foundation Festival in probably 2 or 3 ASEAN member countries. So each year, we plan to hold these Korea Foundation Festival, especially in middle power countries. We set up these signature programs to let more people around the world interact with and know more about Korea. Just we learn from them. Again, I strongly believe that the best way of conducting public diplomacy is to play the middle power leadership role together with like-minded middle power countries in the global society. And the Korea Foundation will carry out our mission to make friends of Korea around the world with support and cooperation with our long-time friends in the United States, and especially at Harvard. Thank you very much.